It's beautiful, mysterious, and calming. But what if I told you that there's something out there, something so powerful, so massive, that it's quietly pulling everything towards it, including our own galaxy? Yes, you heard that right. There's a hidden force in the universe that no one fully understands yet, and it's affecting the very way galaxies move. You're probably wondering, what could possibly be pulling on us from so far away? Well, by the end of this video, you're going to get an answer. But before we dive into that, let me take you on a journey that's sure to leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about the universe. Picture this. You're standing at the edge of a cliff, looking out over a vast ocean. The tide is pulling everything in, like some invisible hand, guiding waves toward a single, unseen point in the distance. Now imagine that instead of the ocean, it's space itself, and instead of waves, its entire galaxy's being pulled. That's exactly what's happening to our galaxy, the Milky Way, but it's not just us. It's millions of galaxies being drawn towards something mysterious. This unknown force, which has baffled scientists for decades, is known as the Great Attractor. It's a cosmic enigma that's both unsettling and awe-inspiring. To make matters even more intriguing, the Great Attractor isn't just a theoretical concept, it's something we can see the effects of. But here's the catch. It's hidden behind the vast cloud of gas, dust, and dark matter that surrounds our galaxy. So, what exactly is pulling us, and why is it so hard to understand? How do we even know it's there if we can't directly see it? You might be asking yourself, how did this mysterious force become so powerful? What does it mean for us, and are we in danger? The answers lie in a puzzle that stretches across billions of years, tied together with physics, dark matter, and a lot of things we still don't fully comprehend. You'll feel like you're stepping into a cosmic thriller, one where we uncover more with each layer peeled back, but just when you think you're about to figure it out, there's another twist. Stick with me, because this story will keep you hooked until the very last second. This isn't just a dry, scientific question. This is a deep mystery about our place in the cosmos. The Great Attractor is more than just a curiosity. It's a force that's shaping the future of everything we know. Imagine the mind-blowing implications of understanding why our galaxy and countless others are moving in ways that defy conventional understanding. Now, imagine this. You, along with thousands of scientists, have spent years trying to get a good look at this force. You know it's out there. You can feel it tugging at you, but it's like trying to find a needle in a haystack. The Great Attractor is concealed within something called the Zone of Avoidance, a giant cloud of gas and dust that blocks our view. It's like the universe is hiding a huge secret from us. But how long can it remain hidden? How much longer before we uncover the truth? But let's stop for a moment and talk about you. Yes, you, the one watching this video. You're likely just as curious as I am. Maybe you've spent time wondering about what lies beyond our galaxy, or the possibility of something greater, something bigger, lurking in the vast expanse of space. Perhaps you've caught glimpses of theories or speculations floating around online or in documentaries, and now you're here to get the real answers. Trust me, this is one of those rare moments when curiosity will reward you with more than just answers. You'll be drawn into something bigger. Something that, at first, might sound like science fiction, but is very much real, very much happening. So, why is this important to you? Because the Great Attractor isn't just a distant, abstract concept. It's tied to the very fabric of reality itself. It's influencing not just the future of our galaxy, but the destiny of the universe as a whole. And when you think about it, isn't that just mind-blowing? That something so powerful, so invisible, could shape the fate of every galaxy in its path. And the fact that we've barely scratched the surface in understanding it should make you even more intrigued. Because the more we learn, the more questions arise. Could this force lead us to some kind of breakthrough in our understanding of dark matter, or even the nature of gravity itself? What could it mean for the future of humanity? The potential is staggering. As you settle in, I want you to know that what's coming next will reveal an unfolding mystery that's been decades in the making. Theories, experiments, and countless observations have all pointed to one thing: the Great Attractor is out there. But the biggest question we're all grappling with is, what exactly is it? Is it a supermassive black hole, as some scientists suggest? Or could it be something even stranger, something entirely beyond our comprehension? The answer, believe it or not, might be more complex than we ever imagined. But before we dive deeper into the science and speculation, I need you to take a moment and think about something. How would it feel to discover that the universe, in all its complexity, isn't what you thought it was? That the rules of space and time are more malleable, more mysterious than we've been led to believe? What if the forces that guide our universe are far more intertwined than we ever imagined? You might find yourself questioning everything you thought you knew. And here's the twist. While we've been focusing on the Great Attractor for decades, a new revelation might change everything. Just when we thought we were close to solving the riddle, a completely unexpected clue has emerged, one that could point to an even greater mystery behind the force that's pulling us. You won't believe where this new information is leading us, and I promise you, this revelation is going to leave you on the edge of your seat. So, here's the deal. We've only just begun to scratch the surface of the Great Attractor, and the answers you're looking for are still out there, waiting to be uncovered. But trust me, what we reveal next will make you rethink everything. Hold tight, because the mystery behind the Great Attractor is far from over. Stay with me, and I promise, you won't want to miss what comes next. Is the Great Attractor just a cosmic anomaly, or could it be a sign of something far more profound? Something that could change our understanding of the universe forever? Stick around, because we're about to uncover the clues that will reveal the truth. You're going to want to see this till the end. The answer is closer than you think. As we venture deeper into the mystery, let's step back for a moment and look at the bigger picture. The Great Attractor isn't just some isolated phenomenon. It's tied to the grand narrative of how galaxies move, how the universe itself evolves. But how did we even come to recognize its existence? How did scientists begin to suspect that this force, invisible and elusive, could be pulling on our galaxy from such an unimaginable distance? It all starts with a series of unassuming observations made in the late 20th century. Astronomers were, for the most part, focused on cataloging the positions of stars, mapping out the vast stretches of space. But something strange was happening. Galaxies weren't just drifting randomly through the cosmos. They seemed to be moving in a very specific direction, as if something unseen was drawing them all together. At first, it was subtle, almost imperceptible. The Milky Way, along with hundreds of other galaxies, appeared to be moving toward a point in space, but no one could figure out exactly what that point was. It was like watching a group of people walking toward a building, but the building itself was invisible, concealed by a thick fog. This began the long, arduous process of tracking down the culprit behind this strange galactic migration. Was it a new, undiscovered object in space? A force we had never accounted for? In the years that followed, astronomers and physicists started to put together the pieces, but the more they discovered, the more they realized just how little they truly understood. What they knew for certain was that the Great Attractor was located in the direction of the Centaurus and Hydra constellations. It was sitting within a vast region of space, known as the Zone of Avoidance, a part of the sky obstructed by the Milky Way's own plane of dust and gas. This cloud of interstellar material was a barrier that made it nearly impossible to peer directly into the region where the Great Attractor resides. Yet despite the obscurity, the evidence kept mounting. Galaxies were on the move, all heading in the same direction, as though they were being drawn by an unseen hand. But why? What was pulling them, and what was hidden behind that cloud? As astronomers continued to probe, they found their suspects. Some believed it could be a massive supercluster of galaxies, something so heavy, so densely packed with matter, that it could exert a gravitational force capable of pulling entire galaxies toward it. Others speculated that perhaps it was a massive, dormant black hole, its influence stretching across vast distances, tugging at anything in its way. But the truth remained elusive, as new theories emerged and old ones were discarded. With each new clue came more questions, and the puzzle only seemed to grow more complex. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Alongside these speculations, a strange phenomenon started to surface: anomalous radiation. Observations showed that the region around the Great Attractor was not only pulling galaxies in but also emitting strange bursts of energy. The type of radiation observed didn't quite match anything known to scientists, and that only deepened the mystery. Was this the result of a massive black hole at the center of a cluster of galaxies? Or was it something even more bizarre, something that challenged our very understanding of space and time? Theories were thrown into the mix, ranging from black holes to dark matter to something no one had ever considered before. Some even began to wonder if this force was part of a cosmic event we couldn't yet comprehend, one that would rewrite everything we thought we knew about the universe. But while the clues were piling up, there was still no concrete answer. In the midst of all these scientific investigations, there were whispers of another potential theory. Some suggested that the Great Attractor wasn't a singular object at all, but a web of forces, an interwoven mass of unseen elements, dark energy perhaps, pulling everything into its grasp. It was as if the universe itself was being drawn toward a singularity that defied all logic and reason. These weren't just abstract ideas. This was the heart of the mystery, and it was keeping everyone on the edge of their seats. Each theory had its supporters, but no one could agree on the true nature of this cosmic enigma. And this is where the tension starts to build. Because just when you think you've got a handle on one theory, a new discovery or observation pulls the rug out from under you. Now, consider for a moment what's at stake. If the Great Attractor is indeed some kind of supermassive object, it could be influencing the fates of entire galaxies. The Milky Way, along with our closest galactic neighbors, is being slowly drawn into its grip. In hundreds of millions of years, this force could dramatically change the structure of our cosmic neighborhood. Could it lead to an eventual collision with another galaxy? What if the Great Attractor is a sign of something far more catastrophic in the distant future, an event so profound that it could reshape the entire universe? The fact that we don't fully understand it means that we're teetering on the edge of a potential discovery that could shatter everything we know about the cosmos. And then, just when you think it can't get any more intriguing, something else pops up. New evidence suggests that the Great Attractor may be connected to another cosmic mystery. You see, while scientists have been focused on the Great Attractor's influence on galaxies, some researchers are now looking at how this force is affecting space-time itself. What if the gravitational pull of the Great Attractor isn't just moving galaxies, it could be warping the very fabric of space, creating distortions that could ripple throughout the universe? This could open up entire new avenues of exploration, one that could change the very way we perceive gravity and time. But even as these theories bubble up, a chilling question remains. What if the Great Attractor is not something we can control, but something we're powerless to resist? Could we, as human beings, be witnessing the inevitable consequences of a cosmic force that no technology or intelligence can influence? And as we inch closer to discovering what lies behind this incredible mystery, there's always that lingering doubt. What if the truth is even stranger than we've dared to imagine? What if it's something so utterly beyond our comprehension that it defies all logic, all science, and challenges the very fabric of reality itself? As we dive deeper into this mystery, I promise you, the twists and turns ahead are going to make you question everything. The Great Attractor is far more than just a cosmic force. It's a key to unlocking mysteries of the universe we've only begun to understand. Stay with me because the answers are coming, and trust me, they're going to blow your mind. You'll be shocked by what's lurking just beyond the veil of the known universe. As the investigation into the Great Attractor deepens, a new layer of complexity begins to emerge. Just when the pieces seemed to be falling into place, the path forward became clouded by unexpected obstacles that threatened to derail everything. The very forces that were once driving the search for answers now seemed to be working against it. A crucial piece of evidence, one that could have unlocked a major breakthrough, vanished without a trace. It was a small but significant data set, observations made by a team of astronomers from a remote observatory in Chile. The data had been carefully collected over the course of months, tracking the movements of galaxies toward the Great Attractor. It was clear that the patterns were pointing to something extraordinary, something that would finally shed light on what was pulling at the very fabric of the cosmos. But when the research team tried to access the data, it was gone. No explanation. No warning. Just a blank slate, where once there had been a clear trail of evidence. This wasn't just a technical glitch, it was something far more sinister. The missing data was more than just a minor setback. It felt like a deliberate attempt to bury the truth. Whispers started to circulate among the scientific community. Some claimed it was a simple mistake, a corrupted file, an error in the system. But others couldn't shake the feeling that something larger was at play. The Great Attractor was no longer just an astronomical mystery. It had become a high-stakes game, one that someone didn't want played out. As the pressure mounted, the team began to face even more unexpected interference. Late one night, while combing through archived images of the sky, one of the lead researchers received a strange warning. It came in the form of an anonymous email, the subject line simple and direct. "Stop digging. This is not your fight." At first, the message was dismissed as a prank, perhaps some kind of hoax or joke from a disgruntled colleague. But then, as the words settled, a creeping sense of unease set in. The email contained no return address, no sign of who had sent it, but the tone was unsettlingly firm. It was clear that whoever had sent it knew exactly what the team was investigating, and they were trying to put an end to it before it went too far. It wasn't just a request, it felt like a warning. A threat, perhaps. The deeper the team delved into the mystery, the more these strange, shadowy forces seemed to conspire against them. Soon, it wasn't just anonymous emails. Odd phone calls began to flood the lines of the observatory. The caller would always hang up without speaking, but there was something chilling in the way the calls came at odd hours, always just as a new discovery was being made. The team's nerves were on edge, and the mounting tension began to unravel the calm focus they had once maintained. Was someone out there trying to stop them? And if so, why? But the mysteries didn't end there. In the midst of all the confusion and fear, a long-buried secret surfaced, one that would change everything. A key figure in the research team, someone who had been considered a trusted ally, was found to have a hidden past. This person had once worked for a private organization that specialized in tracking deep space anomalies, an organization known for its shady dealings and secretive operations. For years, this individual had remained a mystery, carefully hiding their connections. But now, in the face of mounting pressure, their true identity began to unravel, and with it, questions about their loyalty. Was this person truly working in the best interests of science? Or were they connected to something far more sinister? Could they have been planted by someone to steer the investigation away from the truth? The questions swirled like a storm, and the lines between friend and foe grew increasingly blurred. Amidst all of this, a chilling realization began to settle in. The more the team uncovered about the Great Attractor, the more they found themselves up against a force they couldn't comprehend. It wasn't just the physical forces of gravity and dark matter that were at play. There were unseen hands pulling strings behind the scenes, hands that didn't want the truth to be uncovered. But why? What was so important about keeping this information hidden? Was the Great Attractor a force of nature, or was it something far more dangerous, something that had been intentionally concealed to keep the world in the dark? The more questions that piled up, the less clear everything became. The research team, once a unified group, began to fracture under the strain of these external pressures. Accusations flew. Trust was eroded. The pressure to uncover the truth was now a battle against not just the cosmic unknown, but against each other. And just when it seemed like they were on the verge of uncovering something monumental, something that would answer the biggest question of all, what exactly is pulling at the Milky Way, their progress was completely halted. The observatory was broken into. Equipment was destroyed. Data files were wiped clean. It was a devastating blow, one that left the team reeling in disbelief. Everything they had worked for had been erased in an instant, as if the universe itself was trying to keep its secrets hidden. In the aftermath, there was a growing sense of fear and paranoia. Who was behind these attacks? Why were they so determined to stop the investigation? And more disturbingly, were they just the first to take action, or was there something much larger at play? The answers seemed just beyond reach, slipping away every time they got close. But one thing was certain, someone or something was trying to bury the truth about the Great Attractor, and no matter how hard they tried to fight back, The forces working against them were only getting stronger. But in the chaos, a shocking revelation emerged. One of the researchers had found a hidden file, something that hadn't been deleted. It was an old message, buried deep within the system, and it contained information that could change everything. But before it could be examined, the file was suddenly taken offline, locked away by an unknown source. The team was left standing in the dark, knowing that just on the other side of the digital veil was the key to the entire mystery. What did this hidden file contain? What was so critical about this information that someone was willing to go to such extreme lengths to keep it from being discovered? And just as the investigation seemed on the verge of unraveling entirely, one final piece of the puzzle fell into place. But it raised even more questions than it answered. What if the Great Attractor wasn't just a force, but a signal? What if it was trying to tell them something so vital that it could change the course of human history? The question now was no longer just about the Great Attractor. It was about what we, as a species, were willing to uncover, and what we were willing to risk to find the truth. But before the answer could be revealed, the investigation was once again thrown into turmoil, leaving the team, and you, the viewers, on the edge of your seat, unsure of where the next turn would lead. As the research team found themselves trapped in an increasingly complex web of secrecy and uncertainty, another layer of the mystery began to unfurl, one that would only make things worse. The secondary storyline, unexpected and unsettling, added a new dimension to the enigma that was rapidly becoming their worst nightmare. It all began when a close associate of one of the lead researchers, someone who had been working quietly behind the scenes to gather independent data on the Great Attractor, received an eerily similar warning. This individual, a respected astrophysicist named Dr. Emily Carter, had been tirelessly working on a different angle of the investigation, analyzing star patterns in galaxies that might have been affected by the pull of the Great Attractor. She had been operating under the radar, not sharing all of her findings with the main team, fearing that too many people were already involved and that someone might be watching. Emily's theory was groundbreaking, suggesting that the Great Attractor was not just a singular force, but rather a complex, multidimensional anomaly with origins that could trace back to deep space phenomena far beyond anything humanity had ever encountered. Her discoveries were challenging the very foundation of known science, and she knew that if she was right, it would rock the world to its core. But just as she was preparing to present her findings, she too was confronted by a chilling message. This time, it was a letter, mailed to her lab and delivered in the dead of night. The envelope was unmarked, with only one simple phrase scrawled on the front. "Do not look deeper. There are no more answers." She felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand up as she read the cryptic note, its meaning impossible to ignore. The implications were clear. Someone, somewhere, was watching, waiting, and trying to keep her from revealing what she had discovered. The thought of it sent a shiver down her spine, knowing that whatever she was onto had the potential to expose truths far darker than she had ever anticipated. But Emily, unlike the others, wasn't someone who could easily be intimidated. She was determined to push forward, knowing that this warning wasn't just an idle threat. It was a clear signal that her work was too dangerous for certain people to let it see the light of day. As Emily prepared to follow up on her lead, a disturbing twist surfaced. A new piece of evidence, seemingly unrelated, appeared on the radar, and it was enough to make everyone question the assumptions they had built their investigation upon. One of the team members, Sarah, a data analyst who had been analyzing gravitational waves, discovered a series of unusual signals that didn't align with anything previously observed. At first, the data seemed like a mere anomaly, a random glitch, but upon further examination, it became impossible to dismiss. These signals, originating from a distant galaxy, appeared to be encoded messages, almost as if they were being transmitted through the gravitational waves themselves. Sarah, upon realizing the magnitude of what they had stumbled upon, shared her findings with the rest of the team, but their reactions were mixed. Some were cautious, questioning whether it was possible for such a thing to exist, while others were excited, eager to dive deeper into what might be the answer they were desperately seeking. But before they could get a firm grip on the mystery, another wrench was thrown into the works. The signals, which had been consistent at first, suddenly began to change, altering their frequency and structure in ways that suggested they were being deliberately manipulated. It was as if someone or something was aware of their investigation and was actively trying to alter the course of their findings. The new evidence was both a revelation and a trap, and the team was now divided over whether to pursue it further or abandon the investigation before things got even more dangerous. But just when it seemed like they were on the brink of discovering something world-shattering, Emily received a call. It was from a private number, and when she answered, the voice on the other end was barely a whisper. The person identified themselves only as Agent X and warned her that if she didn't stop her work immediately, her life, as well as the lives of her colleagues, would be in serious jeopardy. The voice was cold, devoid of any emotion, but the threat was clear. Someone didn't want Emily and, by extension, the entire team, to uncover the truth. The stakes had escalated dramatically. This wasn't just an academic pursuit anymore. This was about survival. But Emily wasn't the only one feeling the weight of this growing conspiracy. The rest of the team, now aware of the escalating danger, started to look at one another with suspicion. Who could they trust? Was someone among them secretly working against the investigation? With each passing day, the tension mounted, and the lines between ally and enemy blurred. Was it possible that someone had infiltrated their ranks, feeding them false information or sabotaging their progress from the inside? And if so, who? Was it one of the senior researchers who was secretly compromised? Or was it someone further down the chain, someone who had been biding their time, waiting for the right moment to strike? The paranoia within the team reached a boiling point, and soon, no one was entirely sure where the loyalties of their colleagues lay. Emily's warning only compounded the uncertainty, leaving everyone on edge. As the team grappled with the implications of this new threat, they had no idea just how deep the conspiracy went. Could they trust their own observations? Could they trust the evidence they had painstakingly gathered? And what if, all along, the Great Attractor had been nothing more than a smokescreen, a cleverly orchestrated distraction designed to divert their attention from something far more insidious? The twists kept coming, and with each new revelation, the team's grasp on reality grew weaker. But there was one thing that was becoming increasingly clear. The deeper they dug, the more dangerous the truth became. And now, with Emily's discovery and the cryptic signals, they were about to enter uncharted territory. But as they closed in on the final pieces of the puzzle, a new obstacle appeared. A sudden blackout hit the observatory, throwing everything into darkness. The emergency lights flickered on, but the damage had been done. Every single computer file, every record, every piece of evidence they had painstakingly collected, gone, erased in an instant. But this time, it wasn't just data that had been lost. It was something far more critical, the answers they had been so desperately seeking. And with that, the clock was ticking. Whatever had been happening behind the scenes, whatever forces were trying to stop them, was closing in, and they were running out of time to find the truth before it was buried forever. The sense of dread that had been creeping up on the team over the last few weeks suddenly turned tangible, suffocating. Everything they had worked for, the years of research, the endless hours spent deciphering the most enigmatic puzzle of their careers, was now slipping through their fingers like sand in the wind. The blackout had been just the beginning, but as the hours passed and they tried to recover their data, something far worse was unfolding behind the scenes, something none of them had seen coming. It started with Emily. She had been the one to first sound the alarm, the one who'd felt the cold fingers of danger brushing against her every time she looked over her shoulder. But the moment she decided to take the threat seriously, it seemed to grow exponentially, evolving into something far darker and more immediate than anyone could have imagined. Late one evening, as she walked to her car after a long day at the observatory, she noticed something off. Her usual sense of security was gone, replaced by an unsettling feeling. Her footsteps echoed in the empty parking lot, but it wasn't the sound that alarmed her. It was the creeping sense that someone was there, watching her from the shadows. She spun around, heart racing, but there was no one. Only the emptiness of the night staring back at her. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She lay awake in her bed, tossing and turning, feeling like she was being pulled into a nightmare she couldn't escape. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind outside her window, made her muscles tense. It was as if the walls themselves were closing in on her, as if she had become a part of a much larger, much more dangerous game. Her thoughts raced, replaying every moment in the investigation, every cryptic message, every warning. The evidence that had been erased, the threats from Agent X, the mysterious signals from distant galaxies, all of it swirling around her mind, growing heavier with every passing second. She reached for her phone, thinking of calling her colleague, John, who had been one of the few people she trusted completely. But before she could hit dial, her phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number, just like the one she'd received earlier. "Stop asking questions. Your curiosity will be your undoing." The words sent a chill through her, colder than anything she had ever felt. It wasn't just a threat now. It was a promise. They were watching her, and they were closing in. But what could she do? If she went to the authorities, they'd never believe her. If she stayed quiet, the truth would be buried, and maybe her life would be too. But she couldn't just let it go. Not after everything she'd discovered. And yet, something in her gut told her that the truth was far more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. The next morning, things took a drastic turn. Emily arrived at the observatory to find a crowd of police officers outside. Her heart dropped into her stomach as she pushed her way through the gathering, fear rising in her chest. She was too late. The news had spread quickly. One of the researchers, Michael, had gone missing. Michael was close to Emily, a former colleague and someone who had shared a deep passion for unraveling the mysteries of the universe. He had always been the level-headed one in the group, the one who kept them grounded when things got too heated. Now he was gone, his office ransacked, his belongings scattered across the floor like a violent storm had ripped through the space. No one knew where he was or what had happened, but the police weren't offering any answers, only vague statements about a possible kidnapping or an accidental disappearance. But Emily knew better. She knew that whatever had happened to Michael was connected to the same forces that had been pulling at the edges of her life for weeks. As the investigation into Michael's disappearance deepened, strange things began to happen. The team's movements were being tracked, each member under constant surveillance. Emily received another message, this one far more threatening than the last. "If you keep digging, more people will disappear. Your friends, your family, they'll pay the price for your obsession." The words felt like they were branded into her skin, searing with a hot intensity that made her feel exposed, vulnerable, as if she were standing naked in front of the very forces she had been trying to understand. Panic set in. Emily could no longer ignore the mounting sense of danger that pressed down on her like a weight. Every step she took felt like it was leading her deeper into a trap. She could feel eyes on her constantly. When she walked into the grocery store, she caught people glancing at her too quickly, their eyes darting away when she made contact. She heard whispers in the hallways of the observatory, hushed conversations that stopped when she walked by, as if they were talking about her, trying to decide whether or not to include her in their twisted game. Could someone she knew, someone close to her, be behind all of this? The more she thought about it, the more paranoid she became. What if Michael hadn't just disappeared? What if he had been silenced? What if they were all being played, led down a path that had already been predetermined, where no one could make it out unscathed? With each passing day, the mystery only deepened, and Emily's world seemed to unravel further. The realization hit her hard. She was no longer just looking for answers. She was fighting for her life. The game had changed. There were no rules anymore. And as Emily sat alone in her office, staring at the blank walls that now felt like they were closing in on her, a cold shiver ran down her spine. She wasn't just a researcher anymore. She was a target. And every moment she spent searching for the truth only made her more of a threat to the shadowy forces that were pulling the strings. But the deeper she looked, the more she uncovered. Just when she thought she was getting closer, a sudden new development sent everything crashing down. A cryptic message, hidden within the patterns of the gravitational waves Emily had been analyzing, appeared on her screen. It was an unmistakable cry for help, a signal embedded within the very fabric of the universe, an echo of desperation from someone, or something, that knew the horrors they were facing. The message, impossibly complex, seemed to be reaching out from the deepest corners of space itself. But who was it from? What did it mean? And more importantly, why was it directed specifically at her? The answers were out there, but with every step forward, Emily realized that the price of finding the truth might be far greater than she could ever have imagined. As she tried to piece together the puzzle, she was forced to confront a terrifying thought. What if some truths were better left unknown? What if some forces were too powerful, too dangerous, to ever be understood? The haunting realization clung to her like a shadow as she braced herself for whatever came next. The darkness was closing in, and Emily was no longer sure she could escape it. Just when Emily thought she was getting closer to uncovering the truth, everything shifted. The tension had been building steadily. She could feel it in her bones, the weight of every passing second, the haunting shadows closing in. But nothing could have prepared her for the revelation that would throw everything she thought she knew into chaos. It came in the form of a phone call, one that should have felt like a lifeline, but instead plunged her deeper into the abyss. It was John, her closest ally, and the person she trusted more than anyone else. He'd been with her every step of the way, working side by side on the analysis, piecing together fragments of evidence that seemed to defy all logic. Emily had always believed that together, they could unravel whatever mystery lay ahead. But when she picked up the phone that night, her world was shattered by a simple sentence, one that she couldn't fathom at first. "Emily," John's voice trembled through the receiver. "I need to tell you something. I'm not who you think I am." The words hung in the air, so unexpected, so impossible, that for a moment, Emily couldn't process them. Her mind raced, her thoughts spun in dizzying circles, trying to latch onto something that made sense. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. John had always been steadfast, loyal. He had never given her a reason to doubt him. But now, in the chill of the night, everything seemed to fracture, as if the ground beneath her was suddenly crumbling. John's next words hit her like a blow to the chest. "I've been part of this from the beginning," he confessed, his voice cracking with an emotion Emily couldn't quite place. "The research, the signals, everything, it was never just science. It's a plan that goes far beyond anything you or I ever realized." Her heart stopped. The room seemed to close in on her, the walls pressing against her chest as her breath quickened. "What plan? What are you talking about?" she demanded, but there was a sense of dread gnawing at her gut, the feeling that she was standing at the edge of something far more dangerous than she had imagined. John hesitated, as if weighing whether to continue. "I never wanted you to find out like this," he said quietly, "but there's something I didn't tell you. The signals we've been receiving, they're not just random. They're not even from space. They're coming from somewhere much closer. Someone has been manipulating the data, feeding us false information." His voice faltered again. "Emily, I've been helping them. The ones behind all of this. They've been using us." The shock of his confession hit her like a tidal wave, sweeping away everything she thought she knew. She had been working alongside John, trusting him with every discovery, every clue. But now, with his words ringing in her ears, Emily realized that the very foundation of everything she'd believed in had been built on lies. Her research, the evidence they'd gathered, the strange messages, they had all been orchestrated, manipulated by forces far beyond her understanding. And John, the one person she had trusted, had been a part of it all along. Her mind raced. What did this mean? Who could she trust now? Was anyone else involved in this grand scheme? The realization hit her with brutal clarity. She was no longer just in the dark about the research. She was in the dark about everything. The danger she'd been facing, the mysterious forces at play, they weren't just some abstract threat. They were real, and they were closer than she ever imagined. Worse still, the people she'd relied on for answers had been the ones keeping the truth from her all along. With the unsettling truth beginning to settle in, Emily felt a deep sense of betrayal. She trusted John, but now she wondered if her whole team had been compromised. Had they all been pawns in a game they didn't even know they were playing? But what was the end goal? What were they trying to achieve? The answers remained elusive, slipping further out of reach with every new revelation. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps outside her door. A knock. She froze. John's voice on the phone had been full of guilt, but now there was something more pressing, more immediate in his words. "They're coming for you," he had said, his tone grave. "You have to leave now." There's no time to explain. But it was too late. As Emily looked out the window, her breath caught in her throat. A black SUV sat parked across the street, its tinted windows obscuring the faces of whoever was inside. She hadn't noticed it earlier, hadn't even seen it pull up, but now it was like a looming shadow, casting a dark pall over everything. It was a silent warning, one that made her heart race with a mix of fear and uncertainty. They had found her. Whoever they were, whatever John had gotten tangled in, it was now too late to escape. Emily stood, her hands trembling as she reached for the door. But just before she could turn the knob, her phone rang again, this time a number she didn't recognize. The voice on the other end was cold, calculated, and unrecognizable. "You've been digging too deep, Emily," the voice said, each word laced with malice. "The game is over. You've been chosen, and now you're going to play by our rules." The phone clicked off, leaving Emily in stunned silence. Her mind raced. What had she just uncovered? Who was behind all of this? And why had they let her get this far? The pieces of the puzzle were no longer fitting together. Instead, they were scattering, creating more questions than answers. There was a bigger plan at play, a deeper conspiracy, one that Emily couldn't hope to understand in the few moments she had left. The walls were closing in. She was no longer just a researcher on the edge of a breakthrough. She was a target, caught in a game she didn't even know existed. And as the darkness outside seemed to swallow her whole, Emily realized that the most terrifying part of all was this. She had no idea who to trust anymore. Emily had always believed that knowledge was power, that the pursuit of truth, no matter how difficult, was always worth it. But standing now in her apartment with the curtains drawn tight, her phone switched off, and her mind spiraling from betrayal after betrayal, she began to question everything she'd once held sacred. The black SUV was still parked outside, unmoving and silent, as if daring her to make the next move. Her heart pounded in her chest with the kind of pressure that made breathing a conscious act. She felt like a prisoner inside her own life, watching everything unravel from a cage she hadn't realized she was in until now. And then came the message, slipped beneath her door without a sound, in handwriting she recognized instantly. It was from Alyssa. Alyssa was more than just a colleague. She was Emily's closest friend, someone who had stood by her since their early days at the observatory, sharing midnight coffees, star maps, and whispered theories that bordered on the impossible. If there was one person Emily had never doubted, it was her. But as she unfolded the note, that trust began to erode like sand underwater. It wasn't a message of comfort or solidarity. It was a warning. Don't talk to anyone. They're watching me too. Meet me where it all started. It took Emily a moment to process it. The location was clear, an abandoned communication station on the outskirts of town, where their early research into the gravitational anomalies first began. But what haunted her more than the message itself was the fact that Alyssa had known about the threat. Had she been involved all along? Was this another trap? Or was Alyssa, like John, tangled in something much bigger than she could control? Torn between suspicion and the faint flicker of trust still left in her, Emily knew she had to confront Alyssa, but doing so could mean walking straight into the hands of the very people who wanted her silenced. And that wasn't the only decision pressing down on her. Just hours earlier, she had received an encrypted file in her inbox, marked only with the subject line, "The real coordinates." It contained data that contradicted every astronomical model she and her team had constructed. If true, it would mean that the Great Attractor wasn't some distant gravitational anomaly, it was here. Closer than anyone dared to imagine. And worse, it wasn't a phenomenon at all. It was a structure. Emily's hands shook as she traced the simulated map. It pulsed with unnatural precision, centered deep beneath a classified government site long rumored to house dark matter experiments. The implications were staggering. But revealing this information publicly could not only ruin her career, it could endanger lives. That night, as she sat alone in her dimly lit apartment, she received another message, this time a video. It was of her younger brother, Jacob, sitting in a diner with a stranger. The message was simple: stop digging or he disappears next. Everything inside her wanted to scream. Jacob had nothing to do with any of this. He didn't even believe in her research. He thought it was all theoretical science fiction, yet now he was a pawn in this twisted game. Emily's choices had narrowed to two impossible options: release the information and risk her brother's safety, or stay silent and live knowing she'd buried the truth to protect him. She couldn't move forward without betraying someone. And the walls were closing in. The emotional weight of the moment threatened to crush her. The stakes had always been high, but this was personal. Her research had become a weapon in a war she had known existed, and now it was aimed at the people she loved. Every instinct pulled her to run, to disappear, to abandon the crusade for answers. But she couldn't. Not now. Not with the truth hanging just out of reach. Her phone vibrated once more, a private number, no caller ID. Against her better judgment, she answered. The voice on the other end wasn't John's or Alyssa's. It was someone new, someone calm and authoritative, who spoke as if they had been waiting for this moment. "You're not the first to find the signal, Emily," the voice said, measured and emotionless. "But you may be the last who's allowed to tell anyone about it." Before she could respond, the call ended. The weight of that sentence echoed through her chest like a drumbeat, steady and grim. There had been others. People like her, who had gotten close. What had happened to them? Where were they now? Dead? Disappeared? Silenced by threats and ultimatums, just like the one she'd just received? It was no longer a theory. It was a pattern, and she was the next link in the chain. Still, the question clawed at her. Why her? Why now? Had she gotten too close? Or was she merely the most convenient scapegoat? The coordinates, the threats, the betrayal, it all painted a picture far more sinister than she could have imagined. And the deeper she went, the more distorted the truth became. There was no clear path forward. Only fog, suspicion, and impossible choices. Emily stood at the edge of a precipice, staring into a mystery that had already consumed too much. And yet she knew the worst was still ahead, waiting for her in the shadows. And as the clock struck midnight, she realized she had to choose: expose the truth and risk everything, or obey the warnings and lose herself in silence forever. But in the back of her mind, a new fear had begun to grow. What if the great attractor wasn't pulling galaxies toward it by accident? What if it was searching for something or someone? And maybe, just maybe, it had found her. The cold air cut through Emily's coat as she stepped into the crumbling ruins of the old communication station, the place where this had all begun. The metal door groaned open like it hadn't moved in years, revealing layers of dust and forgotten equipment, their blinking lights long dead. Her flashlight beams swept across the walls until it landed on a familiar silhouette, Alyssa. She stood still, arms crossed, eyes heavy with something Emily couldn't quite read: fear, guilt, or both. The note had led her here, and the entire drive Emily had tried to convince herself this meeting would bring answers, some kind of resolution, some hope. But deep down, she already sensed the truth wasn't going to be a comfort. It was going to be a blow. Alyssa didn't speak right away. She simply extended a small flash drive, her hand trembling just slightly. "I kept this hidden from them. I wasn't sure if you were part of it too." That sentence hit harder than Emily expected, and suddenly the years of shared trust, the friendship they'd built under the stars, felt fractured and fragile. Emily took the drive without a word and plugged it into her tablet. As data began to load, her heart nearly stopped. It wasn't just their observatory. It wasn't just them. There were dozens of others. Data from facilities across the globe, all tracking the same gravitational pull. Not a theory. Not a hypothesis. A confirmed and steadily increasing movement of entire galactic sectors toward one concentrated point. The Great Attractor wasn't just drawing in the Milky Way. It had already consumed or rerouted the trajectories of multiple galaxies. The force was accelerating. And someone knew. Emily scrolled furiously through the images. John, weeks after he'd supposedly vanished, standing in a government-controlled research site deep in Nevada. He wasn't a prisoner. He wasn't a target. He was part of the operation. Alyssa confirmed it with a broken whisper. They offered him a deal. A way to keep his work going, but under their terms. He took it. And when he warned you off, it wasn't for your protection. It was because you were getting too close to exposing what he'd helped hide. The betrayal settled like lead in her stomach. Her mentor, her partner, someone she had once admired so deeply, had chosen allegiance with the very force trying to suppress the truth. And worse, he'd been instrumental in shaping the story that was sold to the public, an innocent curiosity, a space-time riddle, nothing more. The lies were systemic, global, and the suppression reached farther than Emily had ever dared imagine. Top universities, scientific journals, private corporations. It wasn't just one group, it was a global network, unified by a single chilling goal, to conceal the nature of the force pulling the universe inward. As the pieces fell into place, Emily felt the weight of how truly outmatched she was. This wasn't just about a scientific discovery anymore. It was about control, of information, of humanity's understanding of the cosmos, of how we interpret our very place in existence. She looked up at Alyssa, whose eyes had welled up. "They threatened my family," she said. "They said if I didn't keep quiet, my sister would just vanish. Like the others." I didn't know what else to do. Emily wanted to rage, to scream, but she couldn't blame Alyssa. Not really. They had all been pawns. Manipulated, watched, coerced. And now, with the flash drive in her hand, Emily held proof. But with that proof came a terrible clarity. She was in real, immediate danger. Just then, the building lights flickered. For a structure without power, that shouldn't have happened. Alyssa's breath caught in her throat. They found us. And before Emily could even react, they were running through dark corridors once used to monitor deep space, now echoing with the sound of boots and static voices. There was no time to question, only to escape. But as they reached the service exit, a figure emerged from the shadows. Not a soldier, not a stranger. It was Dr. Harris, the government liaison who'd helped secure their grant funding years ago. A man Emily hadn't seen in ages, someone who'd always seemed oddly detached from the research itself. He raised his hands as if in peace, but his words carried a different weight. "You have no idea what you're dealing with, Emily. That drive can't be released. If you do, you'll start a panic that we won't be able to control. People won't understand. The Great Attractor isn't just a cosmic anomaly. It's not a black hole. It's intelligent. It's watching." The words hung there, absurd and terrifying all at once. Emily froze. Not because she believed him, but because a part of her already did. And in that instant, as sirens began to rise in the distance and the sound of helicopters thudded overhead, she realized this went deeper than even her worst fears. The universe wasn't just expanding. It was moving. And something was calling it home. But to who, or what, was still a question no one wanted her to answer. Weeks passed since the blackout. The world changed, but not in the ways anyone had expected. There were no alien ships descending from the skies, no great apocalyptic rupture that shattered cities or sent governments into collapse. Instead, the change was slower, deeper, an unsettling shift in how people looked at the sky, at each other, and at themselves. The footage Emily had triggered went viral in record time. Every major outlet from CNN to YouTube creators dissected the mysterious feed frame by frame, and conspiracy theories ran rampant across Reddit and TikTok. Scientists were divided, political leaders were rattled, and the public, they were terrified. For the first time, humanity collectively faced the possibility that they weren't alone, and worse, that they were being watched, cataloged, and perhaps judged. Across the U.S., survivalist communities fortified their compounds, Urban centers held mass meditation events, and a strange calm settled like fog over the chaos. But behind the calm, the fear never left. It simmered beneath every trending video, in every AI-generated think piece, and every new theory that found its way onto Twitter's For You feed. Emily disappeared from the public eye. Not by force or threat, but by choice. After everything she had seen and survived, there was nothing more to prove, no need to justify her actions. The data had spoken for itself, louder than she ever could. She retreated to the Pacific Northwest, to a remote cabin that used to belong to her grandfather, surrounded by thick evergreens and mist-covered hills that felt ancient enough to silence even cosmic dread. At night, she still saw the void when she closed her eyes, still felt the gaze of something beyond the stars pressing down on her chest like a weight she couldn't shake. But in the stillness of her exile, she also found something resembling peace. She began writing again, not scientific papers or manifestos, but quiet journal entries meant only for herself. She filled pages with questions no one could answer, not even the entity that had sent its gaze across time. Why us? Why now? What does it want with the memory of a civilization still figuring out how to be kind? Then, one morning, just as the dew was lifting from the grass, a package arrived at her door. No name, no return address. Just a smooth, black envelope inside a wooden box, and within it, a single sheet of paper covered in handwritten code, a fragment Emily recognized instantly. It was the same missing string from the telescope logs, the one they'd lost during the initial discovery. But now there was an added line. A signature. Not a name, but a location, coordinates that pointed to the middle of the ocean near the Mariana Trench. A new origin. A new anomaly. One the world hadn't noticed yet. Emily stared at it for hours, heart pounding, thoughts racing. It meant the game wasn't over. The message from the entity had been only the beginning. Somewhere, deep beneath the sea or tucked within another dimension entirely, something else waited. A second layer of the archive. Or perhaps a doorway. Part of her wanted to ignore it, to bury the envelope and let the world figure it out without her. But as she stepped outside and looked up at the sky, cloudless, blue, eerily quiet, she knew the truth. Once you had seen the pattern, you couldn't unsee it. Once you'd felt the presence of something far older, smarter, and colder than humanity, you didn't get to pretend anymore. Back in her cabin, she slid the envelope into a sealed journal and placed it inside a weatherproof bag, then stored it beneath the floorboards. Not out of fear, but preparation. One day, someone would come looking again. And when they did, they'd need to know that it had already started once before. The world, meanwhile, kept spinning. People made memes about the alien eye in the sky, influencers capitalized on end-of-Earth aesthetics, and governments scrambled to catch up to something they didn't understand. But for those who paid attention, who really listened, a new kind of static had begun to whisper through their devices. Tiny anomalies in phone recordings, glitches in weather patterns, messages that repeated a familiar binary phrase when run through audio filters.